I easily managed to build and then run a Claude skill that not only cleaned and formatted all the CRM data that I gave it, which covers all the emails that we send to customers, but also then it quickly built an easy to understand dashboard in 8 minutes flat, completely cutting in half the amount of time it takes me to do the same process manually. Let's look at how easy it was to build and then put the skill to work so that you can do it yourself for any processes that you want to automate in Excel. Welcome back to another video on the channel, guys. All the videos here will be about investigating AI and automation techniques to help us all improve the way that we work in spreadsheets day to day. So if that sounds good and you want to learn more, don't forget to like and subscribe. So what actually is a Claude skill? Well, in its simplest explanation, a Claude skill is essentially a set of instructions that you give Claude, like a prompt when creating a skill, alongside any extra bits you want to add into the folder that it will package everything into, such as documents or anything that will give extra context to the process that you want to automate and the task you want to get it to do, such as PowerPoint, extra Excel documents, Word documents, anything like that. Then once it has all of its instructions, and then once you activate the skill either in Excel or somewhere else, it will then work through those steps to complete the process that you've assigned it to do. This is exactly what I've been waiting for, because in work, in my role as a marketing analyst, I used to have a Word document that had a massive long prompt in it that I would take sections from and paste it into the Copilot, have it do that thing to the data, would check to make sure it's all correct, then go and get the next part of the prompt. But now that I can just essentially put all of that and create a Claude skill, so I can just activate it, it will then go about its thing in the background to do that job. So to help explain things a little bit more easily, in my Claude account here, if I go to settings, skills, here are some skills that I've essentially created preparing for this video. But if I go to browse, what you have here are some preset skills that are already been made, and these are a good little clue as to exactly how they're constructed, and they're sort of examples of what good looks like, especially this top one here on the left, skill creator. This is essentially a skill that's been built to help users create skills. If I click on this, now this is essentially the folder that houses all the information that the Claude skill needs to then go and carry out your task. So right at the top here within the folder, the first thing it needs is the markdown file, which is this here skill MD here, which is essentially like your prompt. When you prompt and tell Claude what the process is, it will then put everything together. It'll ask you any more questions that it needs to know about your process, and it will create this markdown here, which is the Bible of what the process is. And you'll see here along this list here everything else that can be bundled into this skill folder. So references, this is where you'll add things like, you could add things like extra Excel documents, PowerPoints, as I've mentioned, and then you have extra bits of code. That's another great thing about Claude skills, is that depending on the type of task that you want it to do for you, if you have certain code that you want it to run for you, you can add that all in here, which is the case in this one here. But really cool. I mean, this really helped me immediately get to know what a skill is, what needs to be added, or sort of what the possibilities are, which I thought was really cool. We're going to be doing a much simplified version of it today, but this is an example. And there's quite a few to look at here if you head to browse. Okay, so first and foremost, before we can get started, we've got to allow and get access to Claude in Excel. It's fairly straightforward, but it's worth mentioning straight away that you will have to pay for the Pro membership tier. That's the first tier that you have to pay for. It's £18 a month in the UK, and that's the only way that you will be able to get Claude in Excel. Now, it is pretty much double the price of getting the Copilot AI agent in Excel, and with Copilot you can also do skills, so there is that consideration. I do enjoy the whole process of setting up a skill in Claude, so I do pay the monthly fee, but again, if you have lots of other payments coming out each month, this is a consideration. But to then access Claude in Excel, you go to the add-ons section and you simply type in Claude in the search bar, and you actually have two options here, and I've got two Claude add-ons in Excel. One basically is Claude alone for Excel, but the second I realized is also Claude for Excel, but it's the Claude add-in that goes across all the Microsoft apps. So essentially you can have one conversation across apps, which is really cool. I'm yet to try this fully, but I'm really interested to see if you are able to do things like carry data and metrics from an Excel workbook and ask it to go directly over to a PowerPoint deck. That would be really cool. But that's mainly what the difference is between the two. In this example, it's probably better sticking with the first one here that is just Claude in Excel. Now, if you then have the Pro membership, there will be a process you'll have to go to where you link to your Claude account, give the relevant permissions, and then you will get the Claude sidebar in Excel, just like we can see here. And already there's some skills that you can have a look at and look through. There's some sample ones here. And if you press /, which is how you can start selecting a skill to use, you can already see here a menu pops up of example ones that you can use. And this will be where you go to access the ones that we're about to create. Okay, so now it's time to create our first skill. So one of the easiest and most simplest ways to go about it is writing down a sort of master prompt of what the process is that you want to automate. If you do have the Pro membership, what you can actually do as well that I haven't tried yet, but I'm keen to soon, is you can screen record you doing your process. This can be sometimes good if there are elements that you might miss if you're writing out the master prompt of the process from memory. Claude would then go through the recording and then create the skill from the screen recording that it watches of you doing the process you want to automate. But in the main prompt that I write of my process, which in this example today will be cleaning this data set here, which is essentially CRM data covering all of Q4 last year across our key categories, basically emails that we send to customers, and we want to track how many sends of those emails go out and the type of engagement, how many users open them, click them, and things like that. There are purposely mistakes that I've put in this data that I'm hoping it will find, and essentially what I want Claude, the skill, to do is to find all the mistakes, correct where it can, and those that it can't or doesn't know how to treat, to give me a tab here where it will just record all the mistakes it finds. But then the final thing I want it to do once it's cleaned all the data and formatted it correctly is to create a final tab on this workbook that's just a simple dashboard that team members can come into this workbook and pull out some initial insights like, top performing campaigns and the average open and click-through rates. There is a format that I will stick to in this master prompt before I put it into the chat for it to create a skill from, and those main pillars that I will follow in that prompt is outlining the purpose of this skill. So once it follows these instructions, this is how I'm going to use the results. Then the process, this will be the step-by-step sequence that I will detail in this prompt. Then the context, and as we've seen, this will be any kind of extra documents, so sample data of what I want it to work through. If you're working with a presentation, perhaps some PowerPoint documents or anything like that. And then finally, some rules about how I want it to treat certain mistakes or errors if it perhaps doesn't have an answer, or specific ways that we want the data dealt with when it comes around to doing it. So for example, if it's missing certain elements within the data, like for example, I've purposefully left a gap here on the click rate, but in the data it does have unique clicks which you can divide by the total number of deliveries for those individual email results where I've left the values blank. It can divide unique clicks by total deliveries and then work out the click rates there. Finally, what I find really useful is at the end of the prompt, I will ask it if there's any kind of further questions that it has or any parts of the process it's still unsure on. This is a really good way up front before it starts creating the skill that you can kind of iron out any extra things it might be confused about. So I'm going to add my master prompt to a Claude chat. And one of the first things that it's doing that I've noticed before is it will notice that I've already built a skill very similar to this. One that I already had pre-built prior to making this video that I wanted to carry out the exact same task. And what I will also do is I will add the sample data set that I have from a previous quarter that I would like it to look through and use as what to expect. There we go, and I've requested it adds that as context in the overall skill folder. Okay, so now it's in the process of creating the skill. In some examples I've seen when testing this process out before, it might actually quickly run the skill in the background just to see how it works and if there's any initial questions that come off the back of that. Also, whilst this is running through and creating the skill, I think it's worth mentioning that on the Pro membership you have a set usage. When I first created this skill to run as practice, before I ran the skill, my usage was at about 5%, so very small. But when I ran this skill that was quite simply all about cleaning the data, formatting it, and creating a simple dashboard for people to pull insights from, I then checked my usage after running that skill and it had jumped up to 18%, so quite substantial. Now your usage limit does reset every 5 hours, so perhaps not the biggest issue, but I guess in a working day, if you want to run quite a few skills to cover and automate quite a few processes, it's quite understandable that you could run into an issue pretty quickly, because that essentially only really gives you a handful of times that you can run a skill before you reach your limit. So just something to keep in mind. Something really interesting that's worth mentioning when I was doing my research is that the tendency is when creating a skill is that you can ask a lot of it and you can jam pack it full of steps to take or really complicated labor intensive tasks. If you're perhaps a marketer and you wanted to scrape websites, put together and write articles, do some research, that can get so labor intensive and burn through so much of your usage limit that actually the more usage you burn up and the more it gets through each of the quite large tasks, almost the dumber the AI can get. And you get something called skill context rot, where essentially the deeper it goes into doing all its tasks you've assigned it within one skill, the more it forgets the initial context of the skill, and you essentially see a drop in results. Okay, so Claude has finished turning my initial prompt into a skill, and what I've got here is split the screen, and on the right I have the markdowns, which is essentially a simple text file that has a description of essentially the process it's going to go through, the objective, and each of the steps it's going to take, and I guess the assumptions that it's going to make. And good, it's referencing the reference data set that I provided. Brilliant, that's good. And what I didn't realize within a markdown is it can add the code that it's going to use within the markdown file. So it's got Python here that it's going to use to essentially access the data, clean it, search through it, look for mistakes. Okay, and then when you are able to access your skill folder and then access the markdown in your Claude account, you are able to edit this markdown. So this is not set in stone, this is something you can go and amend. Okay, then once we're ready and we've been shown that and we're ready to proceed, you'll see here the skill that it's created, the option to download or update skill. It's saying update because I've essentially, as we've seen, created a very similar skill to ones I've created preparing for this video. But it really is as simple as that, and simply doing it there. When you then navigate to Claude in Excel, if I open up the sidebar here into / scroll down, CRM email dashboard, this one here, that's the skill there, ready for us to activate. So I've selected it there and I'll press enter, and it will now start assessing the steps and carrying those out on the data set that it's looking at right here in this workbook. Okay, so Claude has finished running the skill and we have our results on the data clean and the dashboarding of our CRM data. So this was the original data with all of the mistakes I've purposefully put in. And what it's helpfully done here is got a tab of all the clean data, an errors log of everything it's found, and a dashboard laying out tables and graphs of everything I've asked for. So if I just have a look at the clean data just to make sure it's done everything correctly or to see exactly how it's handled it. Again, on the original data, I left some values blank for a few campaigns for the general sends category and the click rate. But if it divided the total unique clicks by the total number of deliveries, it could work out the click rate. It's got all the data there. How does it handle it? It's not a case that data's completely missing, it could work it out. And another thing that I deliberately misspelled what should be general sends, and I've just added general. And if I have a look at the categories column, this is the different types of categories of emails that go out to users. Great, and what it's done is it's noticed that just the word general is supposed to be general sends, so it's aggregated all the results and put them all into general sends for those misspelled general results. So that's good. If I filter on general sends, I want to just quickly check if it's done the calculations. It looks like it has because there's no missing values. But if I have a look, one of the missing values was on an email that went out on the 14th of the 10th. If I have a look here and find that same one, 14th of the 10th, and it's worked it out. It's done it. Click-through rate, it's worked it out. So it's really good to see that it's done that correctly. And if I have a look for specific things like this one error here for property alert emails that go out to users, it had missing values for total sends and different things like that. What was that one for? The 6th of the 12th. If we go to the errors log, okay, great. Yeah, it's listing it here. Property alerts, there were missing values that it found across a few of those results for that particular thing. So it's not sort of tried to do any kind of thing, not that I expected it to, but it's good to know that it is accurately logging all the mistakes it's found. What was also really clever as well is I asked it, we do have a value here, we do have the total number of deliveries, and I asked, and it did actually include the total number of delivered emails, because the total number of emails that get sent and those that get delivered are two different numbers. So whilst it's omitted adding total sends for the category property alerts because it doesn't know the number, it has still included the total deliveries. That is still useful to know, but it was just me just going here to the chat bar, just double checking that, and it did confirm it did still include those results because that's data we still want to know. Okay, and let's have a look at the dashboard. There would be some initial changes to the general layout, but it's got all the tables here that I've asked for. But I guess for anyone coming to this workbook that just want an overview of quick stats for all the email sends in Q4, which is what this data covers, it's got everything here that's going to answer any questions that they might initially have. So it's really good as well that it also just adds a note on the data quality when it was going through and cleaning the data, and it's got everything here as well. So I mean, this is really handy. You'll get a quick understanding across each of the email categories, the average open and click rates, bounce rates and things like that. What's also really helpful as well is it's provided the graphs that I've asked for here, including this one here, tracking click-through rates over time through Q4 last year. So from October to December across each of the category email sends. Really, really helpful. That's going to be really helpful for someone to see, to find and have an initial look at the outliers across each of the categories. Yeah, this is super helpful. Like having this all laid out can help me quickly isolate the fact that property alerts, a click-through rate on property alerts of 11%, so much higher than the click-through rates of all other categories. That's something I can look at immediately, and I've not had to do anything other than run the skill, come back to it 10 minutes later, and it's got those insights for me to dive into straight away. So helpful and so quick. Again, I think just as a final thing, just as a first pass of simply writing out the process, creating the skill, which didn't take that much time at all, to running it and spotting the results here. From this point on, it's really just a case of iterating on this skill. If there's any extra amendments I want to make, or any assurances in the quality of the data, or specific ways I would rather it lay out the dashboard, I can just go straight into the markdown file and make those amendments and try it again. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. That was having a look at creating an initial Claude skill, running it and checking the results and seeing just how quickly the whole process takes. I'd be really interested to hear how you've been using Claude skills in Excel and what processes you've been able to automate using Claude skills. Now, this is all sample data, it's not real, but one of the annoying things if I was to use this skill in my own role as a marketing analyst is that it's not entirely automated. I still had to go and get the data and bring it into an Excel workbook. Sometimes with external platforms that provide the data, they don't necessarily provide an option to deliver the data to a specific folder to then bring it into this Excel workbook automatically. So there is still a manual element to it at the moment, but still, once the data lands in Excel, and the fact that all of this can happen so quickly is really helpful. And a final little detail is that there is a mix of ways you can trigger a skill. What we've done here is the manual way. I've manually triggered the skill to happen in the Claude chat. There are two ways that you can trigger a skill to happen. In today's video, we've done it the manual way. I've manually triggered it in the Claude chat bar here, but there are ways that you can automatically have them happen, and perhaps AI automatically activate the skill, which is something I'm really keen to look at too. So I hope you've enjoyed the video today, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you soon for another video.